challenge the norm, soar to new heights.
Привет, привет.
Better, faster, stronger.
Test, test, test. Ya temizle.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So, I'm grateful to the delegates for a lovely evening, and I would like to express a deep gratitude to State Customs Committee for such an amazing gala dinner, which was taken yesterday, and entertainments. So, and I would like to give some information about logistics. As you know, tomorrow we will have tour, city tour on Friday. So I will invite everyone to register at a dedicated desk at registration area. And I would like to mention that there are just limited, it's limited, and just 200 delegates can participate in this tour. So at the latest tomorrow morning, you should register. And also, the official opening ceremony day behind us encourage all the colleagues still wearing ties. So I should mention that today is more relaxing. So gentlemen, you can take off your ties, as I saw on the first row. So be more relaxed. And we will have also a plenary sessions today. And I would like to say that you can post your impressions on the conference app, which you can download from Apple Store or Google Player, so WCO events, and you can get information about our delegates, about speakers. You can give even stars to them. So you can get registered and also tweet using the hashtag 2019 WCOIT. And I should mention that our honorable guest, Professor Edward Prescott, Nobel laureate in economics, unfortunately couldn't attend our conference today because of some health problems. But he wished every participant good luck and also the work of conference. And now, unfortunately, yesterday we also have some technical difficulties, which so we couldn't play some videos and presentations. And today I will invite you to watch the video, which prepared by TTEK. And I would like to invite to the stage Mr. Shao Min-soon to give some a few words just about this video. Please, Mr. San.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm back again. Yesterday, we just talked about smart borders driven by smart technologies. And smart technologies means more advanced technologies for various targets inspection. And also seamless integration with the current logistics process, and also the intelligent analysis for the images and massive data. Based on this, TTEK can supply smart solution for borders. So next, a real case just show the smart solution for borders. Thank you. a very short video. If you are interested, I'd like to discuss anytime during the event. Thank you for your attention.
And now, dear guests, I'll invite you to watch a small promotion video which is called Innovation, which is prepared by the Innovation Agency of the Republic of Azerbaijan. Please.
Innovation is not a trend when your passion to reach the stars. When measurements are messages, not dimensions. When wonders are created with inspiration, not magic. When the energy that attracted the world has become the icon of the country, discovering energy has become a tradition passed from generation to generation. The result is just the beginning of the process. Where an invention is the change that unlocks new value. Where borders become milestones. When engines are designed not to be, but to win. Where winning is not another challenge. It is the only way to forward DNA code to the generation next. The DNA which won the race over time. The DNA that kept the nation moving. The DNA that unlocked the future. The DNA of the nation that we call Innovation. Innovation Agency, Azerbaijan.
Thank you. And now I would like to invite to the stage Mr. Chong, Keong, CEO Gareth, Assistant CEO of CrimsLogic to provide his speech, Mr. Chong Keong, CrimsLogic in 2006 as Vice President of a Government Business Division. The United VET encompasses solutions, consulting, business development, business planning and international operations, and alliance management. During this tour of duty, the company experienced strong growth, especially in overseas business, with major projects such as Judy's project in the United Arab Emirates and Qatar Customs Clearance Single Window. Please.
Thank you. A very good morning. In your presence, in the presence of so many single window trade facilitation subject matter experts here this morning, I feel truly humbled. And to be honest, I feel really nervous about delivering my presentation about single window and trade facilitation. So I set for myself a very humble goal, and my goal is just to start a conversation. It is a conversation of what we believe could be a new way of looking at trade facilitation, about how single window could be like in the future. So, the trade facilitation and single window concepts, as we know it, have been around, I think, for maybe 30 years. And in fact, my company is very much a pioneer in this segment. Since we first implemented the single window for Singapore way back in 1989, we have seen a proliferation of single window implementations across the world. Last we did a count, we believe there are about 90 of them at this point in time. And we have also seen a surge of usage of new technologies in single window projects, starting from scanners to IoTs to RFID to softwares for visualization, automation, and advanced risk management. However, one thing remains unchanged, and that is trade facilitation is still fairly much government-driven. Governments have been really doing the heavy lifting, taking up the responsibility, making the investments into single windows, into customs management projects to really facilitate trade. This is a good thing. However, when you look at the private sector perspective, actually the main role that the private sector players are playing right now are very much confined to that of a deterrent. It's about supplying the required statutory fulfillment data to the customs authorities. And we believe that now is the right time for us to have a new conversation, one that is of all of community approach, rather than a government-driven approach when we look at trade facilitation, where we can actually encourage and enable private sector players, the trade community in particular, to be more proactive participants and contributors to trade facilitation. And why do we think so? There are two simple reasons. Number one, we think that technological advancements today has made it possible. I will talk a little more about this later part of my presentation. But secondly, and perhaps the more important reason, is that we are witnessing a growing convergence of interests and motivations between governments and businesses. Let's take trade security as an example. Most of the time, even in the recent past or even today, most of the businesses are, in a sense, sharing data with the government mainly to fulfill their compliance duty, mainly to make sure that they can achieve their import and export declaration. This is a very limited area of collaboration. And what we have to look at right now is that, or rather what the businesses are getting more aware of right now today, is that trade security is no longer just a concern of the governments. Because if the governments are better at ensuring trade security, it is better for trade, it is better for business. And because of that, it is therefore not surprising that we have been witnessing more forwardness, more openness amongst the business community in terms of sharing and pushing data to the government. It is also increasingly clear to us that there are many opportunities for making the trade value chain more efficient and more optimal in ways that are relevant to both the governments and the businesses. For example, concerns and questions about how to use or reuse data to improve productivity, to cut down the cargo clearance times, to avoid compounds and fines, or how do you make use of data to reinforce and strengthen risk management, valuation consistency? All these concerns actually cut across both the government as well as the business sectors. So given this growing readiness and convergence of interest and motivation, especially amongst the business community, to collaborate with the government, what we really need to do right now is to lower the barrier, making it easier for businesses to truly collaborate with the government in the interest of a whole, of an all-of-community approach to trade facilitation. And here's a short video, and I hope you will play, to show us a glimpse of our concept.
Better, faster, stronger. Challenge the norm. Soar to new heights. Dare to discover. 30 years ago, we launched the world's first single window, revolutionizing trade facilitation. With the increasing adoption of e-commerce and the Internet of Logistics, vast volumes of data are generated, stored, and processed in real time. How do we harness this power and speed? The single window mesh is where it begins, combining AI-powered RPA and neural network algorithm to dynamically crawl, aggregate, and correlate structured and unstructured data across the entire trade ecosystem. The single window mesh uses data at source effectively. It's faster and easier to collaborate, both in-country and across borders. Correlation of data from all parties along the supply chain makes data aggregation and analysis more systematic, transparent, and comprehensive. 360-degree risk assessment is now possible. Automating declaration filing is now possible. More robust valuation of goods is now possible. With single window mesh, you can conduct these with precision and unprecedented confidence. Join us to welcome new realities in global trade facilitation.
Thank you. I would just like to follow up on this short video clip to speak a little more about the three technological components of the single window mesh, or the mesh for short. Three of them: the robotic process automation, neural network algorithm, and blockchain. So first, using RPA technology, the mesh can actually ease data exchange between parties, between systems, doing away with the burdensome requirements for system changes as well as excessive investments by both the government and the businesses. So currently, if you think about it, when a company wants to connect or wants to exchange data with a single window, very likely the company would have to make significant changes to its systems because it has to adapt to the requirements, the standards, the formats as per the single window's expectations. It is almost like having to learn a new language. This is tough. Using the mesh, parties concerned actually do not need to make these changes. Based on what are defined as required, the mesh can crawl and obtain the relevant data from consenting parties and package them in ways that could be required or that are required by the recipients. So in this sense, all parties can actually continue to be speaking in their own languages, and through the mesh, they can start to understand each other. The mesh also has a repository of neural network algorithm models pre-built based on our 30 years of experience working with more than 26 customs regimes and the business communities. The deep learning capabilities of the mesh will enable it to apply validated correlations to trigger suitable and appropriate actions for completing import and export formalities. And not just that, it can also be leveraged on to complete commercial activities that are relevant to the trade, so that goods can actually move from one country to another. This means that both the commercial and the compliance requirements can both be met on the mesh, and this will facilitate greater collaboration between the private and the public sectors. Blockchain is the third technology component in the mesh, while the RPA and the neural network algorithms allow us to define the how and the what. The blockchain addresses the who and the when. It is about who committed the data, when is it committed, when is it changed, when is it moved. So all this capability will actually allow us to trust the data that are being committed or shared via the mesh, even from those parties that we might not accredit directly. And because of that, it thereby lowers the barrier for collaboration, for sharing to take place. More of these technological components will be discussed at the tech talk session later on in the afternoon, so please join us to find out more. At this point, I would like to share a very simple scenario of how the mesh could work to improve declaration, risk assessment, and valuation processes. In the mesh, declaration formulation can start at any point of the trade flow. It could start when the buy-sell transaction takes place. It could start when the freight is being booked. Relevant data as it is being generated will be progressively harnessed and leveraged on to formulate the eventual declaration. And in fact, declarations are essentially going to be a collection of data. Declarants do not need to pre-fill or to fill up prefix forms. What's more, the mesh is able to ensure that the right data, even the right HS codes, are being applied such that it makes the entire declaration and approval process for both the business and the government a lot more efficient and definitely more accurate. Given the access to diverse data, profiling of cargoes can possibly start from the very origin of the transaction. The risk profile will continue to be fleshed out as the cargo moves along the trade value chain, including, let's say, what happens to the cargo at the port, what happens when trade finance is being applied to, what happens when the cargo insurance company steps into the mesh and makes a valuation of the product or the cargo. As a result of all this, the benefit for us is that we can now have access to not just advanced, but a lot more comprehensive risk assessment. Similarly, the mesh ability to aggregate and correlate compliance, commercial, and market data will enable us to establish fair and more consistent valuation, corresponding to the prevailing market conditions and also incorporating other third-party valuation indicators. So in conclusion, we believe that the primary objectives of trade facilitation and single window remain relevant today. What could be different, really, is for us to leverage on technology, for private sector players to play a more proactive role in trade facilitation so that we can move the entire concept from one that is government-driven to one that is all of community-driven. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chong, for your speech. And our 18th conference, IT conference, is continuing. And now I would like to introduce our second session. So the aim of which is also to explore to what extent customs and our border agencies can leverage on information collected through smart devices to support carriers and logistics companies to move goods swiftly and in a more environmentally friendly manner across borders. So, and the session will be moderated by Mr. Gareth Lewis, senior advisor, who is a very well known in customs committee, and also having served also in the World Customs Organization. Gareth Lewis is a leading international customs expert who has spent more than 40 years on customs modernization in many forms. He started his career working for Australian customs in frontline and management roles, then took a position at the World Customs Organization as a senior technical officer, and has worked around the world consulting modernization projects in the private sector for non-government organizations. So I would like to invite our speakers and moderator to the stage. Good luck.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, and good morning to you all. First of all, how good was last night? I imagine most of you were there. I was there, and I would just like to express my personal thanks and just how gratifying and how wonderful that 2 hours of entertainment was, and the venue and the food. It was really outstanding. And just on that, I was so inspired that I thought when I went back to my room I should try some of that dancing. Why are you laughing? That's very unkind. And had I done so, of course, I wouldn't be here this morning, so yeah, it was a good idea. Hopefully we are all feeling more relaxed today. This session stands in between you and the refreshment break. We've got a pretty tough group here, and we were talking this morning, and if we don't get any questions, then you don't get a refreshment break, okay? So we've got to make that clear. So when you're hearing these great presentations, I want you to be thinking, and I want you to make this as interactive as we can. Originally we had 5 speakers for this session, and now we have 3, so they have more time, and we have more time for question and answer, which follows the 3 presentations. So what are we talking about? It'll be up to them and it'll be up to you. But according to the documentation in front of you, we're talking about the convergence of information, and after all, customs is all about information, and where it fits into sustainability. In particular, the UN SDGs, the Sustainability Development Goals. Now, I'm not expecting all of you to have intimate understanding of those. I certainly don't. I don't work with the UN. But I do know that there is a series of expectations amongst all of us to work to eradicate poverty and hunger and so forth. And there are a lot of implications that come from that. And that includes, and I'll quote, goal number 9. 40 years, you can't read anymore. To promote sustainable industrialisation. I think we're going to be hearing something about that. Technological progress should lead to increased resource and energy use efficiency. For me, that is absolutely key. And the goals of this development, this Millennium Development Goal, includes increased access to information communication technology. So we have a link between this forum, which is dedicated to the interaction between customs business and IT. It's also extremely pertinent to the overall theme of this particular session. I'm just going to briefly, because we have more time, you have to listen to me longer, I'm going to briefly do a tangent. At this afternoon's round table, for those of you that will be present, you'll hear about IATA, the International Air Transport Association. You'll hear about their projections for air passenger traffic. And you will hear that by the year 2035, there's an expectation that the current enormous volumes of passenger traffic will double, or almost double. On the other hand, there are politicians in the United States who've put together something called the Green New Deal, and amongst other things, that Green New Deal talks about the virtual eradication of air travel by the year 2030. So you've got some pretty significant extremes there. What does the future hold? Where are we going? I mean, customs doesn't determine the outcome of things like this. This is determined by forces much bigger than a border regulatory agency. So In my humble opinion, and I am humble, in my humble opinion, the truth of where we shall be in the 2030s will be closer to the IATA prediction than some sort of incredible drop in the whole logistics industry, not just air passengers. So I think we have to prepare ourselves for ongoing increases in volume. But how can that be done in a sustainable manner? I think that's the key. Whether we're talking about carbon dioxide as a byproduct of the procedures and the processes and everything else that goes together into the international trade supply chain, or whether we're talking about other pollutants, or whether we're talking about delays of time and costs and stuff like that, ultimately the answer is greater efficiency, as it has always been. I mean, customs is potentially a roadblock in the overall international supply chain, but if customs works in a maximum efficiency mode, then it does its little bit in terms of improving that efficiency, and as I said, through a complex series of interactions, physical and chemical, reducing the output of CO2. So from my perspective, that's going to be, and when I sum up, I'm hoping that you will all agree, and from the brilliant questions you ask, that that will be the kind of theme that we shall be taking away from this session. That's enough from me. I would now like to introduce the first speaker, probably known to many of you, certainly been known to me for a long time. You've already heard how long I've been around. Well, this guy has been around for quite a while as well. Frank Heijmann from the Dutch Customs Service. He is an acknowledged expert in the business that I've just been talking about. And what he's going to do is talk to us about the dynamics of one of the most dynamic in its own right parts of the world in terms of logistics, which is the Port of Rotterdam, and the implications of what happens at that port for border regulators. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Frank to the podium.
Good morning. May I ask you all for a short favor, to do me a short favor? Please, could you all get up, please? All stand up. Everyone standing, yes? And then turn out one time to the left. Just one turn, full turn, please. It's no dancing. Thank you very much. You may all sit down again. And I will come back to the exercise. That's nothing to do with my speech, actually, but I will get back to it. It's about sustainable trade, about technology, about the role of customs in international supply chains, but also about the responsibilities of customs in international supply chains and how far they reach. Gareth already said, I'll take you along a little bit in the challenges of the Port of Rotterdam and what customs can do to contribute to optimize international logistics and at the same time facilitating, let's say, secure trade lanes, international secure trade lanes. This is a picture of Rotterdam area and the scope of inhabitants, consumers that are being served by the Port of Rotterdam. Rotterdam Port and Amsterdam Airport, the Netherlands as a whole nowadays is dealing with about 1/3 of all European inbound and outbound traffic. So 500 million consumers and a hinterland with a lot of ports and a lot of airports in the EU, about 1/3 of the European traffic somehow is being dealt with via or by the Netherlands. When you put it in the perspective of the development of the administration, of Dutch Customs Administration, in 2007, we dealt with 8 million customs declarations in our organization per year. It was in those days we had IT-related import, export, and transit. Then, since that, we had, in the past decade, we had a lot of developments. We got security amendments in the legislation, which introduced entry summary declarations, export control system. We had security export declarations. We had some simplified procedures for companies which were not taken into the IT systems of companies. We have an annual absolute growth of, since 2014, so after the crisis, of 7% per year. And we deal with this enormous shift of large shipments changing slowly into small packages, which is also nowadays said to be e-commerce. And then considering in 8 million declarations in 2007 and in 2008, we prepared a tender for our new customs declaration system. And the experts within the administration in those days said, it has to last about 10 years, such a new IT system. So when we put out a tender on the market, the system would need to handle at least 20 million declarations. So at Dutch Ministry of Finance, who had to take care of the money, they said, you're absolutely crazy, guys. This will never happen. Why should you, as a customs organization, have an increase from 8 million to 20 million in 10 years? This system doesn't have to be doesn't have to have such a high capacity. We put it through, actually. We were able in 2008 to put a tender on the market for an IT system of 20 million declarations a year, which cost us quite some discussions. Actually, in 2017, which was 10 years after the 2007 calculation, we dealt 215 million declarations, and we expect to grow up to 2020 to go to 400 million declarations. So you can imagine that a change in an organization having a multiplier factor of 25, 30 times dealing with the amount that we had previously, this requires a complete different approach on the way we are working. And this complete different approach, and I'll get back to that later, when you look at, I think we were maybe even one of the first in the world dealing with risk assessment. And what is risk assessment? Risk assessment, in the way that we dealt with it in the past, is we have some findings from the past. We take from those findings some parameters. We translate those parameters into if-then rules. And those if-then rules we program in our system. And when a customs declaration is entered into the system, then it's matched to those if-then rules. And if certain of those parameters match, then we say a risk occurs, and then we put it on the desk of an officer, and we look at whether this risk really is happening and whether there is something wrong. With 8 million declarations, that was already difficult to do. And then it says the outcome, when you have to control 5% or 6%, you have to do physical checks. But 5% or 6% of 8 million was already a lot. 5% or 6% of 215 million is physically impossible to control. And that all based on that philosophy of if-then rules. So this is not possible. So we have to make a change, we have to make a shift. But then when you want to move to that shift, then you have to look on how the world looks like. And the world, the fact is that customs stand in somewhere at a border because people created borders, but the borders is not what's being created by logistics, because logistics move goods from A to B. And A is the one who sold the goods, the one who packed the goods, the exporter, and B is the one who bought the goods, the buyer, it's the consignee. And what they want is that no one knows what is in the package. They want no one to know the details about the package, and they do everything that the package will not be discovered and that the information about the package is not known. And that's all between A to B. And customs is somewhere in the middle, and we suddenly ask to a complete stranger, a forwarder who is actually just moving around the package, and we ask this stranger, can you give me all information about the package, about the content of the package, about the value, the quality, and about the people behind it? And this person in the middle, he says, that's not my role, and I'm not the one dealing with that. So in that sense, the information that we use on risk assessment is declaration information being provided by someone in the middle who is not supposed to know anything about what he's declaring. And that's the way we build up our whole system. And now I get back to the exercise in the beginning. I can tell you the exercise, what you just did, you simply stood up, you turned around because I asked you and no one asked himself, what is now the use of it? And this is the same with blockchain. We talk about blockchain a lot. And blockchain is the solution for everything, and everyone runs behind it. And even in this conference, we have a lot of talks about blockchain. Solution for everything. And because someone shouted it, everyone runs behind it and simply does it and says, blockchain is it. But here in this picture, you can see if persons in a supply chain are not in a role to know anything about anything, then it's not about technology, and it's not about a technological enabler like blockchain solving that problem. We have to look behind it, and we have to dive deep into the roles of supply chain players and supply chain chains, individual chains, and to look into that about can we find another way to have the information available at the right place at the right moment. And if we then really look at, are there other enablers in the supply chain, which are mostly business-driven and not technological-driven, then technology like blockchain or any other kind of technology can maybe help us to serve the goal that the information is really made available, but the drivers behind it actually are really different. One of the items to get more information about the supply chain is to lean more on what commercial parties in the supply chain themselves are really doing. This is a picture about a test that's just recently launched at the Port of Rotterdam, where technology industry, where the Port of Rotterdam, but also businesses are involved, and they have put a container full of sensors. They ship it around the world for about 2 years, and they start gathering all kind of data about the whereabouts of the container, the temperature of the container, how long it is, where, etc. And what they try to do is not only try to find out if the technology works, but a higher value of what they're trying to do is, does the increased visibility at the end also provide a business case for certain parties in the supply chain? Is it of any value? So they do not only approach this moving around of the container from a technological perspective, this is what we're actually mostly doing, but they also will look, is there a demand at the end? Can we create with the new information, new business cases, and these new business cases then could give other certain parties in the supply chain a new need to share information, a new need to have information available or to make it available. So it's not only about the technology. IBM is one of the parties being involved in this, and they also will start making this information available on their global shipping platform, TradeLens. And also there, it's looking for new business cases, new drivers. What we've done in the Netherlands is also looking at a new world. And this new world is maybe this mesh single window comparable, where we look at can we merge the interests between all the different parties in the supply chain? The interest in the supply chain is, and the interests we are trying to identify by academical institutes, by different government agencies, but also by different companies in the supply chain. And we try to find shared interests, so it's not a customs demand of providing information or a legal demand of providing information on certain aspects. It's not an individual party in the supply chain asking for information, but we joined up all the different parties in a complete supply chain and to see if it's possible to create a system where we can have information made available and identify for each individual player in the supply chain the different drivers. A good example is nowadays consumers' demand, where in the past a buyer of goods, an importer, was not really interested in, let's say, the whole flow of his supply chain. The only interest of him was having the goods available in time at his place, so he could supply them to his buyer, to the consumer. Nowadays, we have consumers' demand who want to have transparency in the supply chain because they want to know if there was no child labor involved in the clothes they buy, or when you have a granite kitchen sink, that there was proper labor involved in creating that. And that consumer demand nowadays also urges a shipper, a buyer, to have more insights, to create more insights in his supply chain. And what you see in this example is that when you have all different parties creating their own business case of uploading information and making available in the supply chain, then it is not a matter of we simply ask a shipping line from a government perspective to provide information that he doesn't want to have. The picture I showed you before, a logistic service provider who just moves around the world with packages, and then we ask him to talk about the content of the package, which is actually the biggest problem with e-commerce. We have a buyer and a seller, and somewhere in between we ask the complete stranger about the information on the content and the value. We try to identify individual business cases for each stakeholder in the supply chain and to upload and make available information. And this can be consumer-driven. This can be optimization-driven, like the background of, for example, TradeLens was that Maersk, as a carrier, said, I'm good in moving around, sailing around the world with containers, but 60% of the cost of my containers is involving paperwork. And this is simply influencing my cost too much, so I want to reduce the paperwork. And this is also an urge of better information sharing so they can reduce paperwork. Identifying individual business cases for individual parties, that is for us the biggest goal. And once those business cases are identified, then they have this information sharing in place, and then customs, they can, what we call, piggyback on that information. And piggyback on that information means customs can look into the detail. If companies want to be transparent and they want to be compliant, they have nothing to hide for customs. And customs can look into this information sharing mechanism that trade already has, and we can reuse that information. The advantage can be twofold. It can be creating additional sustainability in logistics. We can have CO2 reductions because we will have less moving around empty containers around the world. We have or half-loaded containers because better information sharing leads to optimization. But at the same moment, from a government perspective, we can reuse the information that is already shared within the supply chain. And that reuse means that we do not have additional burdens for trade to provide information to governments, but governments reuse the information that trade is sharing already for itself and for its own purposes. Nowadays, I talked about 215 million declarations, moving up maybe to 400 million declarations. It's nuts, it's crazy, it's silly. All those companies in the world, they have to join up all those pieces of data, they have to put them in the formats of the different customs organizations or government organizations all over the world, and they have to feed them into governments. And what do? We store loads of information and information and information. But how nice a future could look like if we could simply lean on and reuse the information that is already made available in the supply chain. And when we want something, we pick it when we want it. And for the rest, please leave it where it is. But it's a mind shift. Stop customs declarations. Why should we keep them if trade has the information available and we can pick on it when we want to? Then when we look at what customs then can do with this information, when we have, let's say, a dashboard, when we can look in detail into the information, we can do a different way of working. Instead of risk assessment, picking out a few declarations, we can work on technology, and we call it auto-detection of goods, where the technology where we put in the logistical chain, smart technology, and I think in particular yesterday, some examples of that were shown, where we have improved technology, where goods can move through without hampering any part of the logistics, and the system itself, the computer itself, the X-ray machine itself, it says automatically if there is something wrong. And we've managed to build algorithms already for our container scan, where the machines can say if an empty container really is empty. You could say this is easy, but you have to build in the kind of artificial intelligence in your X-ray machine where it can see that it's an empty container, that it's not tampered with, and that the reefer is not filled up with cocaine or whatever. And we've managed to do that. And when we invest, we keep on investing in creating new algorithms, and we make smarter and smarter technology, then we can put it in the right place on the terminal premises. We move through the container, and now maybe not only 1 or 2 risks, but maybe in future all the risks can be covered by the machine itself, and the machine starts bleeping when something is wrong. Why should we then have all the information available in our system when it runs through the machine and the machine says it's wrong? Same with packages, small parcels, e-commerce, put them through the machine and the machine says whether there is medicines, fake medicines, cocaine or whatever is smuggled in there. Well, that's one aspect. But we also talk a lot about data. And from a customer's perspective, data, we also want to move into auto-detection of data. And auto-detection of data is not only artificial intelligence. What we're trying to do is create on the front end of our systems a lot of business rules. I mean, when in the current world we still have an obligation for declarations. When someone lodges a declaration, you can technically accept it in your system and then start building, putting your business, your risk rules on it and put it on the desk of an officer for further control. But many of the controls that an officer completes in the declaration, they can be automated. And what we did is build a lot of business rules where we say all kind of impossibilities in the combination of data already on the front desk of our import system or export system, we refuse the declaration. When we say there is a certain code and that doesn't fit with the country of origin, or there is a certain good which requires a license and the license is not being mentioned, then already the declaration is refused on front end. And this means that you move from a, let's say, risk-based control where only some of the declarations are being dealt with by officers, we move to a 100% control philosophy with auto-detection of data. And this auto-detection of data is not only on the front end, we also try to match with all kind of other sources. Different sources of customs, of information, the business information, like for example, data pipelines, trade lands, match it against the customs declaration. And when there are any differences in the information of different sources, that is then the trigger for customs to do a follow-up. So the customs officer will be a new customs officer in the future, where now the customs officer has a risk rule which he has to follow, because there is a risk detected. In future, the system will say there is a mistake in the system, there is something is discovered as being wrong, follow up what is wrong. At the end, what we want to achieve is implement our full vision pushing boundaries, where we put at the moment a lot on auto detection, but this reusing information of trade, reusing information chains that are being exchanged by the commercial players, and we want to apply as much as possible burdenless, without any administrative burden, burdenless mechanisms to control the goods, and then put them in 3 different flows where we know them as trusted traders, trusted trade lanes, and the regular flow where we still have to do our controls. At the end, what we want to achieve is we are tax collectors, annoying tax officers, and we are also protecting society against all kinds of threats. We're also contributing to international trade. These are the tasks of customs, and the trade, they want to be recognized for what they do and the quality they have and the compliance they have, and they don't want to have the burdens of different agencies, and they don't want controls to be conducted in the supply chain when it is really necessary. And we were based on the auto-detection mechanisms, on data and on goods, reusing information of the supply chain. We want to, at the end, serve all the traders in the 3 flows that we have identified: trusted traders, trusted trade lanes, and other actors. I have a small film about that, and if the technique works, they now will switch on the film. But yesterday, the power in the building collapsed when they started it, so let's see what happens. That's coming.
International business. In our global economy, it represents a huge series of opportunities, but also irritations and frustrations. Ask Li Wei. 600 shipments from her Chinese webshop arrived at a European airport today. This afternoon, 560 of them will be on their way again by road or rail to their final destinations. 40 won't. Why? She has no idea. Or talk to Jan van Basten. Last month, his container full of avocados left Veracruz in Mexico cooled to 4 degrees and at a humidity of 90%. Today, it arrived in Rotterdam again at 4 degrees and 90% humidity. But what happened to the container in between, on dockside, aboard ship, during the crane driver's lunch break when left unattended? He has no idea. Meanwhile, the medical equipment Leo Muller has dispatched from Eindhoven to a hospital in Nashville has been held up in a South Carolina port for days, and there it will remain until the discrepancies between 3 sets of documents are resolved. But if we adopt the concept of smart and secure trade lanes, they become problems of the past. So when specialists from business, government, and universities get together with all parties involved in physical transportation processes, you can be sure some valuable insights will emerge. Working in unison, they addressed the creation of a new logistics concept, using state-of-the-art IT technology and blockchain techniques, and utilizing a port community system and all kinds of other clever communication tools. Why? Simply to bring together all information concerning shipments in a single network of trusted networks. A systematic approach that starts with a simple order or invoice and gets consistently enriched with data from waybills, checkpoints, shipping notices, container sensors, track and trace systems, and inspection reports as goods move from A to B. The result is an information source that can be accessed by all parties according to their needs and their authorization levels, possibly seeking additional information. Everyone with a legitimate interest in the shipment and with the corresponding authorization. We call it the Internet of Logistics. It's precisely what Li Wei wants, to keep track of her parcels and to trace their whereabouts 24/7. It's exactly what Jan van Basten needs to keep his cool while moving his avocados from one climate to another. And it's a shot in the arm for Leo Muller, who believes medical equipment should be put to work in hospitals instead of hanging around in harbors. And in a similar way, it can give your business the boost it deserves.
This is the example of shared interest instead of pulling out government information, government requirements, and increasing amount of government requirements on international trade. We try to identify the shared benefits, and as said, we call it the Internet of Logistics. I thank you for enjoying the exercise, and I thank you for your attention.
I think I have to sing? No. Thanks very much, Frank. I think we'll all agree that in 13 years to go from 8 million to 400 million transactions is a fair test of your ability to cope with increased volumes in an efficient manner. Okay, so our second speaker it's my pleasure to introduce Igor Zula. He's from the Slovenian Logistics Association, and he has a background as a logistics expert and as a business consultant in the field of logistics. He has a strong background in, of course, the relevant business processes, but also the enabling information technology and the associated project management. So Igor is going to talk to us about about trends in the international supply chain, not entirely dissimilar to what we just heard from Frank, but looking at the social, the technical, the economics, and the environmental impact, which gets right into the heart of what we're talking about in this panel. So please, Igor.
So, hi everybody. Before I start, I would like to express my deep gratitude to Azerbaijan government and friends from customs for giving us such a great hospitality and warm welcome, and giving us the feeling that it is worth for us for being here. This is really a great experience from my point of view. And on the other hand, I would like to give a great respect to the World Customs Organization to prepare such an event. And there is a lot of everything that I found out, I heard, and I hope that I will have an opportunity to bring home as much as possible. So, before I start, can you just raise hands who is coming from private sector, from industry or logistics? So not many, and I would try to do the job and to present the logistics from different worlds to the ones that every day don't handle the goods, that don't faces all the problems with the optimizations, and we will try to put together different worlds. Like Azerbaijan government, they have told us that they would like to make a hub to make the best logistic services in this part of the region. And we've been heard that there is a lot of issues in connection with the greenhouse gases, but there are other options that we have to handle in logistics, like optimizations, like business processes. So at the end of my speech, I hope we all will see that actually this somehow supposed to work together. I will walk through trends. I will try to say a little bit about what supply chain is, what is the situation, and of course then connect optimization with green logistics that everybody talk these days. So yes, originally, like Frank said, logistics, it really works, and it has to transfer goods from A to B. So what is A and what is B? Here we can discuss a little bit. And in between there is a lot of obstacles when we want to be as optimized as possible. And in logistics, at the end of the day, there is a lot of issues that are raising, and somehow we have to deal. For example, when I started to ski, this is really 30 years ago, the one ski has been put together out of 5 different pieces. There was a skiing surface, there was a wooden part in between, plastic part above, and the edges and the threads, and that's it. So now the average ski is consists out of 65 different pieces, and all these pieces somehow has to be delivered to the production line, coming from different places of the world. They have to be mounted, and of course they have to be sold. However, 30 years ago we have to give on average, let me say, 30–40% of our average wage to buy a ski, and today it is quite the same thing. So in between we have to find a way to optimize all these processes. And in the supply chain, we all know that nowadays, due to more of goods, we have a lot of issues because there is no employee anymore that would easily be employed in the logistics. We know that there is a high cost pressure on the logistics, and the lead times really shorter. Not only in the production, when we just start the production and tomorrow supposed to be finished. If the company places an order, of course they want to get this order on the shelves as soon as possible. And in between we have to handle the things. Yes, artificial intelligence, big data, drones, AGV, everything what we are speaking today, it is rather relevant, but you know, implemented AGV, it is not so easy. Speaking about blockchain, coming home to say, okay, now I will introduce blockchain and tomorrow everything will be easy and different. the story behind it is completely different. And of course, now everybody would like to be green. However, CO2 footprint, yes, obviously it is a problem, but just switching from petroleum to gas, it is not such easy as someone would think so. So, yes, like we said, coming from A to B, it's really the goods travel from A to B, but on a different level. One level is certainly when I'm buying the material, and at the end I have to transform it and sell it to take it to the customer. The other A to B is when I'm speaking and when I'm transforming the goods inside of the company. And the same story, as we shall see, is when I'm sitting inside and working inside of the plant, and when I'm transferring the material into the final products. But at the end of the day, we always speak about the customers and suppliers. We always speak about transportation and movements. On one side, we are speaking about 100,000 kilometers. On the other side, we are speaking about meters. We always try to save labor costs, and we always try to save transportation costs. So this is about moving from A to B. And if we want to achieve the results, yes, we want to do less kilometers, we want to do less meters, we always want to be more and more efficient, and of course, yes, accuracy is supposed to be better and better every day. So this to achieve, it is not easy, and there are different methods. Don't read this, because I will really go fast through it, but on every different level there are a lot of opportunities and processes and projects where we can gain some interesting result in our supply chain. So here, as we see, on the strategic level, on the tactical level, and on the operational, really a lot. But on the other side, a lot to achieve on each part of the supply chain. So I have to speak more about the transportation these days. There is an issue, of course, with transportation, with land transportation, because the road transport is not so cheap. From CO2 efficiency, it is really not as kind as it should be. But on the other hand, it is rather fast, and what is very important, it is rather flexible. And from today to tomorrow, as we see, the growing, it's really fast and important, and like Frank said, coming from 2 million declaration to 10 million declaration to 400 million declaration, all the goods supposed to be transferred in between. So what are now the issues, and how we supposed to approach to solve this issue? On one side, we are facing with really uplift of all transfer of all the goods, but on the other side, just watch the first row. We are facing that every fifth truck on the road, it is empty, and calculations of load factor that we are going to speak later on, it goes in the way that first the statistics take the empty kilometers, and then they measure how good the transportation place is fulfilled with the goods. So that means we are having now additional free place and space to improve our logistics, and this, it really is a problem. So optimization is obviously here very important. We are having a lot of different approaches. There are, of course, 7 ways. I hope you all know, because there is no time. I won't go deep into. This is the slide that I could stay not 20 minutes, but 1 hour to speak about any of it. But just for good sake, let me know that improving or removing the defection, removing the overproduction, all the waiting, all excess processing, transportation, keeping stock on somehow, and of course excess motion in general is a problem. It is something that our customers does not want to pay, and we have to find a way how to remove it. So let me try to see or make a closer look to three things of optimization. One is network optimization. Imagine, I don't know, Coca-Cola, when they are doing the distribution of Coke to every distribution place, to every loading and unloading place. If they wouldn't have some sort of strategy where there is going to be the production line, where there is going to be a distribution center, how the transportation paths in between are going to be organized, etc., what costs, if we put all this together, would be, or they are, in place. So when we do a proper simulation and when we try to find a proper way, of course, then this is how we are able to do as less movements. This is how we spend kilometers, meters, etc. The other way around is when we are trying to search the best path on day-to-day transportation, when we are trying to reach our customer. Again, it is not, it is relevant which path I took with my truck, how many stops I do on my way, and since there are obviously different paths possible, different way of approaching to my customer, obviously there are different costs in between as well. And let me face it, in the production, as we said, from one working place to another working place, there are operations, there are activities that really adds value, that are really transferring goods from material to final products, but there is a lot of waste in between, and of course we have to remove these wastes, like here, like we are doing on network optimization, route optimization, etc. So let me try now and connect this with greenhouse gases, with CO2 footprint. There are some basic numbers that we need to understand what actually will follow. This is not something that it came by me. This is something what is general by the rule. And me personally, I produce approximately 2 tons per year of CO2 footprint. And cost-wise, that means that I cost the Mother Earth a little bit over 50 euros per year. So if we understand this, and if we take this philosophy on diesel, for example, and if we connect this with the trucks, average truck approximately needs a little bit over 25 liters per 100 kilometers, and in good distribution practices that once that the truck's supposed to make a little bit more than 9,000 kilometers. Originally, that means that one truck is supposed to produce almost a little bit something over, with diesel, over 80,000 kilos of carbon footprint, and the cost a little bit above 2,000 euros. And this changes whether I use petrol or I use gas, etc., etc. So now these are the bases. Now, if we would think on this through really green, then we would say, okay, now let we switch, let we change our transportation park, and let we move from diesel to gas. Yes, approximately, if we would have now some mid-sized, small-sized company with 25 trucks, and we would then save almost 1 million tons of carbon footprints per year. But on the other side, we would save approximately 25,000 euros. So is this really a motivation for me to change? Probably, if I would be an entrepreneur, no. But if I improve load factor, if I make opportunity to reduce the kilometers, if I fulfill my space in the truck a little bit better, then that means that I will make really less kilometer. Together with this less kilometer, I wouldn't do so much costs in between, and my savings would really differ from what we have been heard before. Yes, from carbon footprint point of view, the savings would be half of this, but on the other side, the company would save over 1 million euros per year. So now this is really a different story, and this is now really a driver that I have to think about if I'm an entrepreneur. If I do the network optimization and if I'm able to reduce the kilometers, to improve the network, like I did it for, let me say, as well for 20%, and if there is 25 trucks driving in between, then of course here the figures are even more, are as well very interesting in comparison if I switch from diesel to gas. We have to find a new distribution model, yes. We have to make a new distribution practice at the end, but here are the figures, and this really makes more interesting. What is relevant here before I change this is that Euro, it is always the driver. Yes, we can speak that we like the nature and we have to take care for the nature. It is important for the nature, but how are we going to come to there first? Of course, we have to take care for and to take care for our balance sheet, which will help us to improve the carbon footprint as well. So obviously, we cannot think just on the way that I will going to switch from petroleum to gas. Obviously, I have to do the job before. I have to find a way how to optimize the business, and then I will have enough of everything so that I can change my company towards green as fast as possible. So optimization and carbon footprint supposed to work with hand in hand, not the other way around. This is just from my side, and if there are any questions, we can speak about this later on. And so thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Igor, for giving us that interesting private sector logistics perspective. Gee, you heard him say we're each responsible for 2 tons of carbon dioxide a year, yeah? I think those dancers last night, they were about 100 tons for that presentation. Sorry to go back to that, but it did impress me quite a lot. Leading on from what we just heard from Igor, we now have from the European Bank for Construction and Development, based in London, Tara, I'm hoping, Tara, I get your name right, Shirvani. And you will see, I think, a strong connection between what we just saw from Igor, from Slovenia, from the Logistics Association there, and the wider perspective that you'll see, but similar issues when we listen to Tara. So she has a background, she was with the World Bank as an infrastructure expert, and is now a leader in sustainable transport solutions and digitisation at the bank. So let's learn about what this bank does, because perhaps many of you don't know much about this bank, and in particular how it works toward something called green cities, green logistics, and targeted finance, targeted financial assistance in order to bring that kind of outcome about. So please, Tara.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I have to be very honest with you. I am finding myself in an incredibly difficult situation. One, I'm the last one standing between you on your well-deserved coffee break. Very difficult. Second, I disagree with key arguments from my previous speaker in his slides. And thirdly, half of the things I wanted to say have already been covered. So it's very difficult to try to keep you engaged and interested, but I will try my best and I will make sure that there is going to be something worthwhile for everyone in this room about the next 15 minutes that I'm going to tell you about. So let's start first. Who in this room has heard of EBRD? One, blinded. Is it really just one person? Two. Three, 4, ouch, this is very painful, 5, okay, well, if there were more than 5 people, I would have spared you the next 4 slides, but given that you all haven't heard of us, I think it's very important that we give you a bit of an understanding of what we do and how we're actually going to be involved and are involved in some of the key discussions that are ongoing in the area of facilitating trade finance. So we've heard very much in the last 2 presentations some key arguments around the new latest technologies that are going to drive innovation when it comes to border crossing, trade facilitation, technology solutions, but there has not been a lot of talk about who's going to pay for it, who's going to bring in the money and who's going to finance that, both for the private sector but also with collaboration with the government. And the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development is one of the key players in this arena, has had a long history of actually working with governments on facilitating the transition to market-based economies. We're active in over 36 countries, and we have a strong presence in the former Central Europe and Central Asian region. We've invested quite a big portfolio, around $117 billion, and invested heavily in infrastructure projects in the former Soviet Union countries. We're owned by the European Union, the European Commission, and there are 65 member countries. And we also invest not only in sovereign loan, but also heavily in private sector, IPO deals, equity stakes, and PPP investments. So what makes EBRD special? Well, EBRD was very much heavily involved in financing the transition towards market-based economies after the fall of the Soviet Union. We have a very strong focus on the private sector, focusing on conducting and delivering new capital structures and are very close to market pricing, therefore kind of having an ensured regulation around that there's no market distortion in the way we do our pricing. Of course, the other thing is that it's our responsibility not only to bring capital to our investors and the countries that we operate in, but also to provide advisory services and policy services. So really kind of ensure that the governments that we're working on make the right decisions when it comes to deciding between green investments, technology advanced investments, and how to help them progress towards the development curve in order to make the right solutions and not just replicate the mistakes that other governments have done before them. And of course, our preferred creditor status gives us privileges and immunities to help in the risk mitigation for our clients that work with us. So as I said, we work very closely across a very large range of regions. And it makes it difficult, but it also makes it very exciting, because our regions stretch from Estonia all the way down to the Middle East, all the way to the east to the former Soviet Union countries. A month ago, we have published our flagship Knowledge Economy Index report. And that report goes into detail to basically categorize all our countries of operation at the level of innovation that they stand. in terms of what's the level of broadband connectivity, how much have they been able to incorporate technologies, what is the status of the enabling environment to actually implement some of those technologies we're talking about around blockchain, around IoT technology, drones. And as you can imagine, the range is very, very far-fetched. And we have, very similar to the private sector, many governments that come and tell us that, you know, we've heard of blockchain technology, it sounds great, it's going to be the future, we want to invest in this new technology to facilitate trade, have a record of where goods come from A to B, but it's our responsibility to look at it and see whether this is the right investment for them, and also what is the repercussions it's going to come with. And when I say repercussions, there's a reason why I say this word repercussions. For example, my first speaker, and my second speaker, they very prominently and rightfully talked about the potential of blockchain in mesh networks and enabling trade. But when it comes to kind of implementing these technologies, there is also a huge consideration to be made on the environment and what it means for climate change. Because the data that needs to run through the servers in order to actually enabling the running of a blockchain requires a huge amount of energy. And if this energy is not carbon neutral or renewable, then actually you're pushing your country way beyond their availability of gas and electricity in order to actually fuel this transition. To give you an example, very simple, some of our research has showed actually that only last year, the running of Bitcoin mining around the world took as much energy as was necessary to fuel the whole country of Ireland with electricity for a whole year. So that's a lot of energy that you need in order to run these systems. In fact, one single Bitcoin transaction needs as much energy that is needed to power 31 US households in a day. So on one side, we have a huge problem on finding enough energy to run these systems. But on the other side, where are we going to find this energy in a green and renewable way? Because studies have actually shown if we continue embracing this technology that has brought so much economic growth and potential and opportunities and jobs with it, but we continue the same trajectory for its growth, actually it's going to push our country, not the country, actually it's going to push the planet to reach a 1.2 degree warming within the next couple of decades. And the UNFCCC climate scientists have told us, once we reach 1.5 degree warming, then there is no more time to optimize your companies to make better business and then think of CO2 emissions, because simply there won't be any more ports and there won't be any more assets that you will be able to manage. Most of it's going to be sunk costs. So those are key considerations to be having, and I think the EBRD's role in all of this is to advise our governments and our private sector clients on making the right decisions, to avoid stranded assets, to plan for the future, and advise them on how to make the right technology decisions that enable them to future-proof their investments, also in terms of climate change. And of course, transport is at the heart of all of our discussions, as we rightly said. And the EBRD is very, very much invested in investments in this sector. We have invested almost $16 billion over the last year, and we're very heavily invested in the sectors of ports, shipping, railway, and border crossing management and trade facilitation is one of the key areas. We're working very much in the area, in the region of the Caucasus and Central Asia. So how we are actually kind of looking, as I said, on facilitating green investments within transport, within trade facilitation, border crossing falls into that, is looking at three distinct areas. On the one side, it's technical cooperation. So what we provide as a bank is, of course, advisory services. We have invested almost $20 million per year of support to advise governments in sector reforms and project preparation around developing the policy environment enabling the investments into new technologies. We're also heavily involved in the discussion around regulatory frameworks. How can we build the right knowledge platforms and the capacity building systems to enable the governments to take ownership of the technologies that they will be provided? Because the worst thing that of course could happen is that we recommend a private sector investor to come in, build a technology, and then after 5 years the government stands there with the highest, the latest technology, but is not able to actually embrace it, use it moving forward. And this is, I think, a key area where we really try to advise our clients as best as possible. And of course, in project and investments, as I said, we have a preferred creditors rating. We provide a wide array of financing instruments, both for the public and private sector clients, and we're very heavily invested in risk mitigation. Many of the investments that we talked today and yesterday around technologies, of course, have also a climate resilience and climate adaptation angle to it. Rightfully mentioned, the use of technology, if carefully considered, can also have big changes in terms of local air pollution reduction, climate change, CO2 reductions, etc. And we will partner heavily with EU climate finance donors in order to provide the financing to enable our governments to take the right decisions. We have mobilized over 160 million euros from global donors every year. That's from the climate investment funds, the adaptation funds, the European Commission, the Green Climate Fund. And these range around CapEx grants, concessional financing, guarantees, risk-sharing opportunities. And it's all in focusing around overcoming the problems of affordability and kickstarting more of the investments that have a green angle. And we've started looking at this adaptation also, of course, in the use of financing some of the trade facilitation technology opportunities. Some of the examples of climate finance that is also applicable to Azerbaijan context is, on the one side, the Green Logistics Program, which is funded by the EBRD and GEF, the Global Environment Facility, that has an objective of financing and supporting the modal shift from more fossil fuel intensive transport modes to renewable and more green transport modes, fostering a lot of investments into innovation in logistics, and is very heavily involved with a focus on investing in the Black Sea area and the Mediterranean area. We provide concessional finance at preferred rates, and we're covering up to 15% of the capex of the project costs, as well as I said, technical assistance, policy, grants, in order to prepare and implement the projects accordingly. Of course, then there is the Green Energy Special Fund, which is a collaboration between the EBRD and the Taipei Investment Fund, with the objective of reducing carbon emissions through the introduction of new technologies, best available technologies. And I think many of the technologies we've been talking about today would fall exactly within this investment framework and the pillar of ideas that are falling in between this Green Energy Special Fund. We provide financing for up to 50% of a loan and up to 100% of a subcomponent of a loan that really fulfills a couple of our requirements when it comes to ensuring that it's really the use of new available technologies and that will have a significant carbon saving. And lastly, FinTech. FinTech is one of the funds that is financed by the EBRD and the European Commission together with the objective of introducing climate technologies that so far have had a very low penetration. So early to market, pioneer technologies, which would be for many of our countries of operation a first to be introduced, and by itself would have too much of a risk to be implemented by the governments. This is where EBRD would step in as the guarantor, but also as an enabler of the deployment of this type of technologies. We have a lot of interest by the private sector in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and the Central Asian region in general. And I think this is some of the ideas. I'm going to stop here. This is some of the ideas of how we're trying to be a key market player within this area and how we're trying to use our financing and our advisory services in order to enable the transition towards more digitally enhanced trade facilitation measures. I'll stop here and maybe we can have a discussion afterwards. Thank you.
So, as I threatened at the outset, there's no refreshment unless we get some questions. So, okay, I mean, I'll come clean. If you can't think of some, you have to listen to me again. I'll ask some questions because I think there was a lot of food for thought in what we have just heard. So, please, if anyone would like to ask anything of any of our three excellent panelists, please put your hand up and someone will bring a microphone to you. And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to, first of all, ask a question of Frank, our first speaker. Frank, yesterday, in fact, you were in the room as well. I saw a presentation from the Port of Antwerp. Now, I know in Rotterdam you don't talk much about Antwerp, but it was very interesting to see the extent to which they're using the kind of disruptive technologies that we just heard in the last session in order to promote the Port of Antwerp as green and clean, etc., sustainable development of the port, with incredible projections of growth in that port, similarly that we will see in Rotterdam. My question to you is, are similar kinds of disruptive technologies being used in Rotterdam? And in particular, in your answer, could you, if possible, it may not be possible, is there a role for customs in this?
To the first part, yes, there are similar kind of technologies used in the Port of Rotterdam. I showed you the picture of the container, which is the smart container, which is an initiative of the industry together with the port authorities, the Port of Rotterdam. On top of that, there is a smart port initiative running where all kind of sensor techniques are being used under and above the surface, the sea level, to see where there can be applications that can be used for optimization of the port. This is, let's say, the technological part. But next to that, the Port of Rotterdam also is aware of the fact that we are in a global energy transition, and maybe you're aware of Port of Rotterdam is big in containers, but is one of the biggest ports of the world, mainly because also the bulk and the oil stocks that are there, and they know that that is going to change. So they are in the middle of or not in the middle, they are in the beginning of a transition where they say the port has to get a complete new function, and this new function is not into oil anymore, but it's into energy transition. And they're looking for a new role into energy transition, wind energy, whatever new energy sources that are being invented in the future. So next to the technological part, which is rather short-term research and investment and looking where technology can use to optimize trade and flows, they're in the middle they are in the beginning of a big transition where, and also technology used, but mainly focused on the energy transition. Sorry,
yeah, customs,
one point.
Yeah.
The customs point. What we follow as customs, the technological part, because we see that it's one of the roles in coordinated border management, is that the government has to act as one, and where the technological features that the port authorities are testing can serve somehow burdens, the reduction of burdens for trade, and we can reuse that information for our purposes, or other authorities can reuse, then we will absolutely do that. So we are part of all those projects, but more from a perspective, is there something that we can pick out of that to simplify procedures for international trade?
Thank you. Very good. Okay, thank you very much, Frank. Look, it's very difficult to see out there because we have 16 solar thingies up here and we can't, it's very difficult to see in the room. Do we have any questions? Here at the front.
Thank you for interesting session. The Director General of the Customs Service of Azerbaijan wants to comment on these discussions, and he wants to do it from the tribune, if you allow. Buyurun.
Mən ilk növbədə hörmətli məruzəçilərə təşəkkürümü bildirirəm və bəzi məqamlara aydınlıq gətirmək və gələcəkdə biz gömrük olaraq nə etməliyik? Ümumiyyətlə, bu ticarət zəncirinin iştirakçıları sualı ortaya qoymalıdır, biz nə istəyirik? Və hər üç məruzəçinin çıxışını dinlədik və auditoriyada fərqli yanaşma ilə şahidi oldu. Burada istər blockchain texnologiyası, istər ticarətin asanlaşdırılması, istərsə də bu işləri apararkən intellektual, süni intellekt xidmətlərindən istifadə olunması və bunların nəticəsində xanım Taranın son məruzəsi də bəlli olur ki, bu yanaşmalar gələcəkdə bizi ekoloji tarazlığın pozulmasına və enerji sərfiyyatına qədər gətirib çıxardacaq. Gömrüklər olaraq biz nə etməliyik ki, gələcəkdə həm ticarətin asanlaşdırılması və eyni zamanda risklərin idarə olunması prizmasından ekoloji tarazlığı qoruyaq və blockchain texnologiyalarının istifadə edilməsinin təşviq edək. Mən hesab edirəm ki, burada çox dəyərli məruzəçilər də buna öz fikirlərini, öz yanaşmalarını ortaya qoydu. Amma biz gömrükçü olaraq hər zaman ticarətin sərbəst, ticarətin rahat getməsinin tərəfdarı olsaq da, ölkələrimizdə olan bürokratik əngəlləri nəzərə alaraq ki, hər bir ölkədə bəlli bir standart var və bu standartların icra edilməsi zamanı çıxa biləcək problemləri ortadan qaldırmaq üçün mütəmadi ticarətin əngəli kimi ortaya qoyurlar. Və blockchain texnologiyasına verilən üstünlüklərdən biri, hesab edirəm ki, biz bir an öncə bəlli bir standartları ortaya qoymalıyıq. Beynəlxalq, istər ümumdünya gömrük təşkilatında, istərsə də ticarət zəncirinin bütün iştirakçılarının əhatə edə biləcək normaları ortaya qoymalıyıq və biz buradan yola çıxmaqla həm limanlarımızın, həm ticarətin asanlaşdırılması və ticarət zəncirinin risklərini ortadan qaldıra biləcək və xüsusilə də ekoloji tarazlığa səbəb ola biləcək problemlər yaradacaq məsələləri ortadan qaldırmalıyıq. Mən xanım Taranın fikrinə razılaşıram, amma bir tərəfdən də razılaşmıram ona görə ki, blockchain texnologiyasının istifadəsində sərf olunacaq enerjini xanım Tara qeyd elədi, amma bugün 100 milyonlarla, milyardlarla yazılan gömrük bəyannəmələrinin ortadan qalxması ilə biz həddindən artıq enerji sərfiyyatına qənaət etmiş olacağıq. Yəni, bunların da hesablanması getməlidir. Çünki əgər biz gömrük bəyannəmələrin istifadəsində, gömrük bəyannəmələrin yazılmasında orada milyardlardan söhbət gedir, sərf olunan enerjini biz əgər ortadan qaldırırsa, vahid ortaya blockchain texnologiyasından qoyaraq gömrük bəyannəməlindən imtinaya gedilirsə və standartlar bəlirlənirsə və bu zaman biz bu tərəfdən də enerji qənaətinə müəyyən şəkildə nail olacağıq və istər ticarət zəncirinin bir tərəfindən olan biznes subyektləri tərəfindən, özəl şirkətlər tərəfindən də maraq göstərilir və buradakı ilk tədbirdə həm özəl qurumların, həm gömrük xidmətlərinin və aidiyyatı ekspertlərin burada bircə iştirak eləməsindən son 1-2 gün ərzində məruzələrdən də ortaya qoyulan fikirlər bizi bu cür görüşlərin, bu cür fikirlərin uzun illər aparılmamasına yönəltməlidir. Konkret standartlar ortaya qoyulmalıdır və bu standartlar ətrafında da blockchain texnologiyası adı nə olursa olsun, intellektual IT sahəsindəki modern innovasiya layihələri həyata keçirilməlidir. İstənilən halda biz ticarətin rahat və sərbəst şəkildə hərəkətini və şəffaflığı təmin etmək istəyirsə, buna sadəcə finans nöqteyi nəzərdən baxmamalıyıq. Hər hansı bir dövlətlərdə bəzən blockchain texnologiyasının qaçaqmaçılığın qarşısı alması məqsədi ilə daha öncədən məlumatların alınması kimi baxılır. Bəzi dövlətlərdə bunun daha çox vergi toplamaq məqsədi ilə bu texnologiya üstünlük verilir. Yəni bu məqsəd burada tək olmalıdır və bu məqsədə nail olmaq üçün də mən hesab edirəm ki, yəni təklif olaraq da yəni gələcəkdəki bizim görüşlərimizdə bunu blockchain texnologiyasının inkişafı ilə bağlı istər Maliyyə Avropa yenidən inkişaf bankı olsun, istərsə də digər maliyyə institutları bu layihələrə dəstək verməlidir və biz pilot olaraq bu layihəni istənilən bir neçə dövlət ilə başlatmalıyıq və bunun üstünlüklərini sahibkarlar, xarici fəaliyyət iş adamları görməlidir və buradakı üstünlükləri digər məsələlərdə biz təşviq etməliyik. Yəni bu texnologiyanın və bu sahədəki inkişafa gətirib çıxara biləcək ən yeganə metodlardan biri ticarət zəncirində tətbiq olunan bütün şəxslərin bura cəlb olunmasını təşviq edəcək standartları ortaya qoymaqdan ibarətdir. Mən bir daha bütün məzuniyyətçilərə təşəkkür edirəm. Hesab edirəm ki, bu standartların müəyyənləşdirilməsi və maliyyə institutları tərəfindən bunun dəstəklənməsi gələcək blockchain texnologiyasının 8 milyondan, əgər bugün 400 milyon bəyənlənmədən söhbət gedirsə və bizi 10 ildən sonra nələr gözlədiyi artıq bugün bizim üçün dəhşətli bir vahimə gözləyir deyə bilərik. Çünki amma biz bu texnologiyanı və bu yanaşmanı dəyişməsək, Kyoto Konvensiyasının istər tələbləri olsun, istərsə də gömrük sahəsindəki ticarət zəncirinin bütün subyektləri tərəfindən aparılan o islahatlar və inovativ layihələr həyata keçirilməsə, bizim önümüzdəki illərdə bu problemin aradan qaldırılması üçün gec qalacağımızın siqnalını verir. Hər kəsə təşəkkür edirəm, diqqətinizə görə sağ olun.
Thank you, sir. Such a wide-ranging and perceptive speech, almost, but certainly more than just a question. Before I hand it back to the panel, your question about standards is well made. I mean, we're talking here about disruptive technologies, and despite the likes of the Revised Kyoto Convention and the Safe framework and the sorts of work being done in UN CFACT and any number of other standards bodies you might wish to mention, the pace of the technology is moving way ahead of the ability of the experts sitting around in rooms able to create the types of standards that we just heard discussed. That would be my observation. So look, clearly, given that Tara was mentioned, I would like to ask you, Tara, to respond, but in so doing, I wonder, having just a little knowledge of what you do, and particularly how it might relate to the Caspian region, I wonder if you can, in responding, talk about the kinds of disruptive technologies that are in scope of the bank's activity, and then in particular, if you can talk about the digital trade window, which I understand is being looked at as one of the projects for Caspian Sea ports, because that has particular relevance here in Azerbaijan.
Hello? Okay. I'm very, very happy about the question, and I think it is a key area that we kind of need to look into in more detail, because it all depends on making wise and smart decisions that are sustainable for the future. And we have to kind of make a coherent calculation and decision making on ensuring that when the right technologies are going to be implemented, they're going to cut down the tape through the implementation of the blockchain, and we're going to have much less on fewer custom declarations. Of course, this is going to bring environmental benefits. Of course, this is going to be on one end of the tailpipe, going to bring huge amount of savings. However, we have to make sure that the enabling environment, the energy systems that are fueling this transition towards new sustainable advanced technologies are the right energy sources. So whether that is the integration of new renewable energy sources, wind farms, solar PV, microgrid installations, these are all discussions that ideally have to be had at the beginning. And the Secretary General mentioned exactly the right point. Being in the right discussions, having the right decision makers and stakeholders involved in the decision-making process to ensure that we're not just passing the problem from one part of the tailpipe to the other part of the tailpipe. The EBRD is trying to focus very heavily on trying to see where we can advance trade facilitation within the Caucasus, the Caspian Sea region as well. And one of the areas we're working on is the digital exchange, a container digital exchange system, focusing on facilitating transit freight across seaports, Port of Baku, Port of Aktau in Kazakhstan, and Turkmenbashi. And we are enabling and working closely with those three governments to facilitate transit trade through the establishment of kind of like it's very similar to a national single window, but it's looking more on facilitating the movement of more kind of paperless trade between carriers, shippers, government agencies. Customs also comes into play, all with the aim of cutting down transaction costs for intermodal transport facilitators. So we're involved in this project. I think that this is going to make a big difference for the regions, for also the bigger goals of the region. So everything that kind of falls within enabling trade across the New Silk Road, enabling trade more faster, more efficient across the middle corridor. This is kind of where we've been putting quite our efforts for the last few months.
Thank you, Tara. Before we move away from this, I think that was such an all-embracing question or series of issues that were raised. Would Igor or Frank have anything to say on that topic before we move to any other questions? You don't have to. If you still can have refreshment, but.
Thank you, Gareth, and thank you, Tara. I would just like to add something to the last speaking of Tara, because I think this is important for this what we are speaking about now. Obviously, there is not disagreement. It is obviously different understanding of what we all have been spoken about. Coming out of the logistic industry, I would give you an example that we are going to be able to understand what actually I've been told. So I'm working for a company that has a little bit over 50 trucks, and of course, more or less all of them are diesel trucks. And mainly they are transferring the goods from Slovenia to Netherlands, the flowers, and then of course back. So recently they have bought 2 trucks on the gas, and what has been a problem is that on the way from Slovenia to Netherlands there were only 3 gas stations when they were being able to fulfill their truck. And even before they came to the situation that they would be managed to do this, they have to handle with all the pumps because there was someone else that were being taking all the capacities of these pumps. So would be the best way if they would move for all 50 trucks to gas? Probably yes, but this is something that is not an option at the very moment. However, what is an option is that they optimize their business. What I wanted to say is that when you are optimizing a business, the green effect is a cause, not a mean. So this was the main. Do I sign for this, what you have said to all of us? Of course I do. We all breathe the same air and we live in this earth. But when you are inside of the business, then obviously you have to consider everything else. And at the moment, the money is still the main driver, whatever we say. So sorry, and thank you.
No, thank you, Igor. I think I agree. I don't think it was disagreement per se, but a different perspective. And I mean, you're very much at the pointy, practical end of logistics. Have we? I think I should probably make it, despite the fact I don't know about you, but I have found this to be an excellent interactive. Sorry, we have a question from. Are you ready to go? Have you got the? Right, here comes the microphone.
Thank you. I'm going to speak to French. Je vous remercie. Le panel est très intéressant. Moi, je voudrais poser deux questions. La première question, c'est par rapport donc au thème même du panel. Est-ce que les banques ont prévu des fonds de bonification pour donc encourager le mode de transport écologique? Parce qu'aujourd'hui, avec les modes de transport que nous connaissons, il y a un impact réel sur l'environnement. Comme vraiment on est en train de faire la promotion de l'économie verte, est-ce que les banques ont prévu, ou bien il y a un système de financement prévu pour donc encourager ce type de transport? Deuxième question, c'est par rapport au délai de livraison. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes conscients que, effectivement, le transport peut impacter sur l'environnement avec l'utilisation des énergies, notamment fossiles. Est-ce qu'on a prévu dans le schéma, en termes de délai de livraison, un schéma qui puisse permettre de réduire les délais de livraison avec les modes de transport écologiques? Donc voilà les deux questions et je vous remercie.
Thank you. If I may, Tara, ask you to address the first part, and perhaps Igor and of course Frank, you can always jump in the second part.
Thank you very much for the question. The EBRD, of course, at the institutional basis has targets of what percentage of their overall investment has to be green. We have a target around 40% that all of our investment has to be green. We follow international standards. We have standards with other IFIs on climate finance and tracking of the share of green investments that are part of our operations. And we take this very seriously. And we take it very seriously in looking also not only into investing CapEx into transport investments, but we also look very heavily at investing into resilience and adaptation. So we have several donor funds that we look at in order to climate-proof installations when it comes to trade facilitation, border crossing stations, but also adaptation and cooperation for road design, tunnel rehabilitations, climate-proofing port facilities. We're very heavily invested in those, and we kind of take this as one of our core mandates to ensure that a big chunk, as I said, almost 40% of our investments fall within the narrative of it. On the other side, we of course at the urban level have many ongoing projects. One of the flagship initiatives of the EBRD is the Green City Action Plan, which enables the facilitation of moving towards more green transport modes within an urban transport context. And we have almost 25 cities now across the EBRD region signed up as part of the Green Cities Action Plan, where we discuss and we work very closely with the urban and city level governments in order to ensure that they have gotten the right technical assistance to consider what are the short-term, medium-term, and long-term considerations they have to take in light of climate change, not only for transport, but other modes of energy generation, and then we provide them with concessional financing in order to fuel that transition.
Yes, thank you very much for a very interesting question. Actually, I try to address these issues as well through my presentation, but I would like to say something into addition. 4 years ago, European Logistic Association gave the award to the companies PepsiCo and Nestlé for their common project. It was rather interesting project because when these two companies look on their supply chain, they saw that actually they are somehow can work together. They can use the different paths and routes, and of course they could use common logistic services. So what they did, they supply, they order a study, they make a project when external consultant was running this project. They have additional company in between that was being taken care of, that the data from PepsiCo was not being seen to the Nestlé and vice versa. But at the end, it came that they have the same logistic premises. They share the transportation goods. They share the transportation vehicles, and costs of transportation went down. And the load factor, of course, of the warehouse, of the trucking vehicles, etc., capacities significantly improved. Of course, they earn a lot of money, but this is how they were more green, not from different gas, but due to the optimization. And of course, there will always be a pressure on delivery time. But the most important answer from my perspective is collaboration. All the new technologies goes towards collaboration. Uber is collaboration. Yesterday we were driving and trying to find a way to drive with Uber with people. Tomorrow now, of course, if I can drive a man from A to B, then of course I can give a package to my car and to deliver it. So collaboration is, I believe, it's the future, and the technology here is an enabler. However, we are really in Slovenian Logistics Association, we are trying to find such a project where two different companies actually collaborate in the logistics, but it is really hard to find. And why is this an issue? Because here we have to switch the culture, not only the business process. But the future is in collaboration. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Time is up. I hope that we have gone at least some of the way toward answering the questions that were posed to this panel. Thanks very much for your attention and for your questions, and please, now you're allowed to have your break. Thanks very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, a few minutes, please. So, okay, thank you. I'm grateful to our moderator, Gareth, and the presenters, and I would like to express our deep gratitude to Chairman of State Customs Committee of the Republic of Azerbaijan, Mr. Safer Mehdiyev. And now we will have a coffee break, but I would like to give some information that we will split into two streams, as we did yesterday. So stream C will look into cutting red tape with connected devices, leveraging the Internet of Things. So I would like to mention that it will be here, it will be in this room, and with English, French, Russian, and Azerbaijani interpretation. But the stream D will be at the multifunctional hall C. It is from the main entrance to the left. And after this, so streams will be held from 11:30 till 13, and please, panel sessions, the delegates after this will invited for a networking lunch sponsored by GETS, CrimsLogic from 18 till 14. So, and the topics of our tech talks will cover risk management, single window, next technologies such as big data, WCO data model, border management, and smart borders. So, thank you for your attention. Please, we'll be here at 16:05. So now we had 30-minute refreshment break sponsored by Smith's Detection. Thank you for your attention.